Serious, what are some of the creepiest declassified documents made available to the public? Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was subjected to grueling, degrading psychological experiments while he was an underage student at Harvard. At the start of the Cold War, Henry Murray developed a personality profiling test to crack Soviet spies with psychological warfare and select which US spies are ready to be sent out into the field. As part of Project Nkultra, he began experimenting on Harvard sophomores. He set one student as the control after he proved to be a completely predictable conformist and named him Lawful. Long story short, the latter half of the experiment involved having the student prepare an essay on his core beliefs as a person for a friendly debate. Instead, Murray had an aggressive interrogator come in and basically tear his beliefs to pieces, mocking everything he stood for, and systematically picking apart every line in the essay to see what it took to get him to react. But he didn't. It just broke him, made him into a mess of a person, and left him having to pull his whole life back together again. He graduated, but then turned in his degree only a couple years later, and moved to the woods where he lived for decades. In all that time, he kept writing his essay. And slowly, he became so sure of his beliefs, so convinced that they were right, that he thought that, if the nation didn't read it, we would be irreparably lost as a society. So, he set out to make sure that everyone heard what he had to say, and sure enough, Lawful's Industrial Society and Its Future has become one of the most well-known essays written in the last century. In fact, you've probably read some of it. Although, you probably know it better as the Unabomber Manifesto. At the beginning of this year, the US Navy was granted several patents for tech that would allow aircraft to ignore friction and inertia while being powered by a room temperature superconductor. The implications of such a patent are huge, because it would not only revolutionize air travel completely, it would also open up terrifying new possibilities for spaceflight. A patent by no means confirms the existence of said technology, but the US Navy must consider it viable enough in future in order to patent this tech now. That being said, the patents all expire around mid-2030. Take that as you will. The most exciting section of one of the patents, it is possible to envision a hybrid aerospace/undersea craft, Hawk, which due to the physical mechanisms enabled with the inertial mass reduction device, can function as a submersible craft capable of extreme underwater speeds, lack of water skin friction, and enhanced stealth capabilities, non-linear scattering of RF and sonar signals. This hybrid craft would move with great ease through the air/space/water mediums by being enclosed in a vacuum plasma bubble/sheath due to the coupled effects of M-field induced air/water particles repulsion and vacuum energy polarization. There was a declassified Soviet program where the military tried to use rabbits to psychically communicate between submarines. It was based on the premise that a mother rabbit reacts strongly when one of its offspring is killed violently, even if the mother rabbit is miles or hundreds of miles away. The program involved keeping the mother rabbits at a land-based station and killing the baby rabbits in the submarine. Message content was determined by the frequency and the strength of the reaction from the mother rabbit, which was supposedly dependent on the violence of the death. The documents were declassified a while ago, but only translated in 2016. Just adopted a rabbit. This hits close to home. This FBI investigation file titled Animal Mutilation. Back in the 1970s-80s, the media's attention was drawn to some anomalies taking place not only on American cattle farms, but all over the world. Cow corpses were being discovered in fields, missing organs, with surgical holes in their sides, with no blood. For a brief time, this was passed off as a strange coincidence. But eventually, the public got so worked up that the FBI commissioned an investigation. 6 months and $45,000 later, they found nothing. Nothing. No trace of a person, machine, alien, anything. Everyone was left hanging, but strangely, it died down. The reports of animal mutilations have simply stacked up to since then, and to this day there have been excess of 10,000. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get even more awesome content. Come on, it just takes 1 second. Operation Lack biological warfare testing done on US cities. Principally, the operation involved spraying large areas with zinc cadmium sulfide, which is very toxic. Many who were affected died of cancer and the testing was never followed up on. Most of the neighborhood's genetic makeup was dug up for no reason, and no apologies were made. My mom told me one time she was living in California, they stated they were spraying to get rid of fruit flies/gnats. They woke up and all the fish in their tanks were bleeding out their eyes, and she also had a miscarriage a week later. That story always stuck with me and made me wonder. I think there was a lot of creepy things that came out when the East German Stasi files were released after the Berlin Wall fell. All citizens were allowed to view their own files, and many were shocked to find out that their own relatives were informing on them because they had no choice, and various other things. A good movie about this is called Other People's Lives. Edit, I got the name of the movie wrong. It's The Lives of Others. In late 2017, cables between the US Embassy in Jakarta and the State Department were declassified that casually tracked the massacres of the PKI that took place in Indonesia between 1965 and 1966. Other declassified documents also reveal that a US Embassy employee gave a list of suspected communists to the Indonesian army, and all 5,000 people on the list were rounded up and killed, with many tortured. In the end, between 500,000 and 3 million people were executed. The casual indifference to political genocide expressed by US government employees is chilling. Operation Northwoods. America wanted a better shot at destroying Cuba, especially after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Bay of Pigs invasion was terrible. So the plan? Fake a terrorist attack planned and carried out by CIA operatives and frame Cuban citizens/government agencies. Then America will be bound to support the destruction of Cuba. JFK vetoed this suggestion. He then tried to disassemble the CIA and fired the director. JFK was then killed, and the fired CIA director went back to his job and took the lead on JFK's assassination. There are profound similarities with 9/11. The government didn't like certain Middle Eastern countries, wanted to go to war, the public didn't. Terrorist attack happens, America goes to war. Frightening. Project Acoustic Kitty was pretty weird and creepy if you think about how things would be if they were successful. Basically, the CIA wanted to put microphones and transmitters inside of cats and use them to spy on the Soviets in the 1960s. It cost about $20 million and was a huge failure. But the thought of my own pet being used to spy on me is pretty unsettling. Well, this one isn't mentioned yet, so I will add it, but honestly it's more dumbfounding for its potential stupidity than it's being covered up by the government. Operation Starfish Prime. Once upon a time, there was a scientist named Van Allen. He was interested in rocketry and space. The Russian government had launched the first artificial satellite into space, Sputnik. Van Allen considered this to be a publicity stunt, as the only thing Sputnik did was beep. Van Allen designed a satellite for the USA that had scientific instruments on board to gather data on radiation in the upper atmosphere. He found out there are moving bands of radiation that surround the Earth, now called the Van Allen belts. Later, the USA was still fighting the Cold War against the Russians. Van Allen had made himself famous with his discoveries and had the United States military now funding his research. Here is the stupidity and mild cover-up. The US military wanted to give the Russians a show of force that proved they were technologically superior as far as nuclear weapons were concerned. The military came up with the idea of detonating a hydrogen bomb in the atmosphere just to see what would happen. They went to Van Allen and told him to release a statement saying this was safe, as he was now the expert regarding radiation in the atmosphere. He told them it was a terrible idea, they didn't know what the aftermath would look like, or its effects on the population, or the chemistry it would change. They reminded him that they signed his checks and did it anyway against his advice. The government silenced all of Van Allen's criticisms and stated he was fully in support of the experiment and happy with the results. The effect on our cancer rates has never been established. So in Sweden we have this law that basically says that all state documents is available for the public and includes all legal documents as crime scene pictures, autopsy reports and such. Back in 2008 there was a horrible crime where a jealous ex-girlfriend barged into her ex-boyfriend's home with a hammer and killed the new girlfriend and her 2 children, 1 and 3 years old. Normally they mask the pictures and the autopsy reports before they are made public when they involve kids or other sensitive content, but in this case the unmasked version leaked. So in 2008 the documents, complete with pictures, contained small children with their heads smashed with a hammer, their bloody house and such was released for the whole Swedish population. Those pictures is still easy available, even though the surviving mother and the stepfather, the boyfriend, pressed charges against the Swedish government as well as the Pirate Bay. The pictures and the interviews with the convicted murderer and the testimonies of the first responders is still haunting me. Definitely the documents done by investigations on US soldiers in Vietnam. Here's a bit. My Lai was not the only massacre, and US soldiers frequently beat My Lai. There was a story of a mother hiding in a small safe area from US soldiers, who ran out because she thought that they were gonna throw a grenade inside. She ran out and got killed by US soldiers. Oh, and they knew she wasn't a Viet Cong. Why did the soldiers do it? 2 reasons. 1. The Viet Cong constantly recruited civilians, so in order to stop the recruitment, US soldiers began killing innocent Vietnamese citizens. 2. Military officials rewarded the soldier with the highest amount of kills with a case of beer or a day off. I'm not ducking with you. One BBC journalist dug into the documents released by the Pentagon during their investigation. Oh, and the Pentagon never followed through with any charges. No one was arrested, no one was tried. I don't know when that happened, but apparently very freshly after WW2 the US CIA started an experiment where they gave hundreds of pregnant women radioactive fluids, promising them its medicine to ease the pain and smooth end delivery. Nearly every single woman suffered a miscarriage and some died themselves. I'll try to look it up to add a source. Edit. It was part of their MKUltra experiment, where they gave willing and uninformed subjects various toxic substances as a means to find out if mind control could be achieved. My favorite would be the Nth Country Project report. In the 1960s, 2 physicists were given all unclassified information available concerning the atomic bomb to see if they would be able to design a working nuclear weapon from scratch. Spoiler, they succeeded. Here is the declassified report itself. Today, a single enthusiast with modern desktop PC and some freely accessible software can do the same. This is my hobby project. Welcome to the FBI watchlist. How the government made it illegal to expose the government for the illegal things they have done. When exposing a crime is treated as committing a crime, you are being ruled by criminals. Edward Snowden. Not sure if this has been mentioned or not, I'm not scrolling through a million replies. The site is run by a guy named John Greenwald, u/Blackvault, started putting in FOIA requests when he was 15 and never stopped. Currently has what is arguably the largest privately owned collection of declassified information from the US government anywhere, and the entire archive is accessible for free. Not a direct answer to your question, but anything you want to know about stuff the US government was up to can be found buried in there, and he's taken the time to sort some of the more interesting stuff out to make browsing easier. Cheers. Congratulations, you reached the end of this awesome video. Now, like and subscribe, like we talked earlier, come on.